it's one way or the other. So hello, my name is Christina Maloney, and I'm a motion media design professor here at SCAD. Actually, I'm from the Atlanta campus, and it's always so nice to come home to Savannah for a couple of days and be a part of this event. So this is our fourth and final panel for the evening, From Passion to Profit. We're going to be joining industry leaders as they offer insights on what it takes to run a successful motion design studio. Through this panel, we will learn how to navigate challenges of starting and growing your own business while staying true to your own artistic vision. So tune into this conversation about taking a leap of faith and making your dreams a reality. So let's welcome our panelists to the stage. So before we begin, I'm going to have all of our panelists introduce themselves, tell us about your role at the company that you're with, and I'd also like to hear how long you've been where you are now.
There we go. I think it's working. Awesome. Nice. Just like everyone does. You got to check the mic over and over throughout the whole panel. My name is Matt Garrison. I'm one of the co-founders and directors of content at Dash. We're a high-end animation and motion design studio based in Raleigh, North Carolina. And you're asking how long we've been at the company?
Yes.
Dash started a long, long time ago. It feels like that at least. We started Dash back in 2015 with the belief in the power of creativity and community. So everything we do really revolves around a lot of 2D, 3D animation and trying to connect really great people on great projects.
I am Austin Bowens, co-founder at Revi.co, another Raleigh motion design studio, though really we're all over the world, so just me in Raleigh. But day-to-day we're doing lots of social media work as well as trying to help the motion design community connect, doing lots of work with musicians for live events as well as corporate conferences, explainers, and all that jazz. And so Revi's been around for 3 years, so that's how long I've been there too.
Hello, everyone. I'm Christina Barna. I'm creative director at Scholar. I've been there on and off a little bit since 2016, but they have been around since, for the past 15 years. Before that, I was actually an independent contractor and had my own little business as well. So that's a little bit, hopefully, what I'm going to get to speak to today.
Hello. Hey, Josh Norton from Big Star, founder, executive, creative, CEO. At that point, you just give yourself any title. I graduated SCAD in 2000. I started Big Star in 2004. So that's 20 years. Thanks for having me.
I'm Phil Guthrie. I'm the founder, creative director at Too Fresh. I graduated SCAD in 2009. I think that was the year before MoMI started. It was broadcast design and motion graphics. Was that what yours was? Motion design, okay. Had a few names. We do mostly sports and gaming, broadcast stuff for entertainment, promotional stuff, mostly things that air in between commercials.
Awesome. All right, so we have a range of just experience on this side, and I'm really excited to talk a little bit about it. And we're going to sort of talk about this as a journey. Oh, you bet. It's week 9. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about this as your personal journeys into your positions and your roles now. Was there a point in your careers when you decided that you actually wanted to move maybe beyond just being an artist and start to take the leap of, I want to own a studio, I want to be in a higher position? What was that like for you when you were still in your younger days as an artist?
I know for me, I graduated college of design at NC State University and really had only taken one motion class, and it just really stuck with me. I just love the typography, the combination of color palettes, the arrangement. I was always a little bit ADHD, so the idea that I could work in multiple compositions and then move them away was always really nice. And I got into an agency in North Carolina and had a really great experience. I came in, I was super junior, I didn't really know what I was doing, and there was a lot of really great people along the way that just helped me a ton. One thing I recognized, for me personally, when I was growing, is that I slowly started to find myself in a silo. And some of you all may identify with this even now, and I'm sure some of you on the stage have navigated this as well. But when you're in a silo and you're kind of doing all this work and it feels really lonesome, it can be really hard. And so for me, I started asking this question, is there a better way? You know, I looked at other agencies, other studios, and thought maybe I could join their ranks. And then I started looking around my own neighborhood and started asking questions, why does North Carolina not have a really wonderful animation studio? Because it's a growing populace, there's a lot of tech there, and so there was a need for more animation. So for me personally, it was kind of this need and want to connect with other people, an idea and a belief that better work happens together, and there wasn't really anyone that I felt like in our neighborhood that was doing that. And so for me, that was the reason that I took the leap and said, maybe I'll try this myself.
I've been doing really small design jobs whenever I was like 13 or 12. So no company's going to hire a kid that age, unfortunately, for me. So I kind of just always had to start just on my own. I wasn't taking any classes in freshman year of high school in graphic design or anything like that. But I did have a small YouTube channel, and I couldn't pay anybody to make myself any banners or anything. So despite really wanting to be an engineer all those years ago, I kind of just happened into this a little bit. And so eventually I started doing more and more projects for people across whatever connections I had on Twitter at the time. And as a result, over time, working with bigger and bigger people, I was like, okay, I have to do the college thing. I got to figure that out. So we'll go for graphic design. But I was still doing a lot of freelance work at that time. So by the time I decided to go to college, I actually met my co-founder Noah there as well, and we had both been freelancing for a little while. And we weren't really working at any other studios or anything, so we just naturally decided to start our own thing and see where it would go.
For me, it's a little different because I know that, you know, everyone here is kind of like an owner. I feel like I was an independent contractor for a little bit, and now more in like a leadership position in one of my favorite studios that I always dream to work at. So for me, the way it started is, you know, I think we're all just creative kids and just found ways to kind of like, you know, express that in any way possible. For me, one of the versions was, you know, taking my parents' green comforter and putting it up and trying to key something and just starting to get a little bit into VFX, always into fine arts. So I kind of went for digital filmmaking because that was what seemed the closest to what I wanted to do. And then while I was there were just like a couple hours of classes of animation, and that's where I fell in love with it. So I really try to push to do that. And originally I had started in the industry just looking for staff jobs. I was originally from Italy, moved to the States about 10 years ago now. And I was able to get a chance at Scholar. That was one of the first places that really believed in me. But then after a little while, I was like, you know what? I'm searching for more. I want to own a little bit more. So I kind of like went my own way and got a chance to kind of like meet a lot of people. Actually got to work with some of the people on this panel. And yeah, from there, I pretty much like built my own little network and business. And just like last year, I kind of like step back away from that again to chill a little bit and not do as much of like the trying to look for clients and producing, and really focus on what I can bring to a team through my work.
So yes, like I said, I graduated in 2000 and moved to New York, couldn't find a job, went back to Buffalo where I'm from. I got a call, came to New York, I said I live there, I'll do anything to, you know, work here. And as soon as I said that, they took the offer down $5,000. It's true. From $35,000 a year as an assistant at a place called Version 2 to $30,000 a year. And I was like, no problem. And I started, and it was a terrible job. I was a terrible assistant, but I met really wonderful, talented people. And I also was a designer animator. I was a terrible assistant, like I said. So I was there for 10 months and I got fired. And I was just kind of doing odd creative jobs around New York for a couple years until I landed a position, a freelance position at Imaginary Forces, based on the work that I was just doing on my own. And that was a really big deal. But I also noticed after 2 years, it felt like a dead end. It just didn't feel like they were going to give this guy a real shot at any kind of creative leadership, and there was a real desire for that. There was a desire to create my own ideas and not just follow. And that really drove me to start my own thing. So I would work during the day doing freelance gigs, and then I would work at home at night, moonlighting essentially, which I think probably a lot of people on the stage did that. Be careful about double dipping. But at any rate, I just decided one day that I'm no longer going to go into other companies. I'm only going to work at my studio, which at that time was a little cheese grater Mac in my East Village apartment. And that was 20 years ago. But I think it takes a lot of conviction to start your own thing, and whether it comes from a desire to grow your community in a unique way that you feel driven by, or like myself, where you really wanted a larger creative voice, I think that's a common story, is just kind of going for it and having that conviction. So that's where I came from.
Hello? Okay. I also graduated from SCAD. As soon as I graduated from SCAD, I had a job waiting for me in LA. I was so excited, ready to get out there. I made the drive from Savannah to LA. I got there and I said, "Hey, I'm here for my full-time job." And they're like, "Who are you?" "Oh, I'm Phil. I'm here for my job." They're like, "Oh, we have no idea who you are." And I said, "This guy, wanted to bring me in. Oh, he doesn't work here anymore." So, yeah, my parents gave me 2 months to survive. And then actually, Josh here gave me my first job out of school. So bravo to SCAD on SCAD here. So thanks, dude. So I worked with, that was my only full-time job I ever had, actually. I worked with Josh and then went freelance for about 8 years, bouncing around a ton of studios, making commercials, broadcast packages, music videos, blah, blah, blah. And just got totally burnt out, honestly. I thought, I just want to sit on my couch and make explainer videos, and I just want to do that. That's all I want to do. So for about a year, I did that, and naturally, Adidas and Snapchat reached out and asked me to do a project for them, and I thought, oh, this is cool. Maybe I can make a company out of this. The next thing you know, we started in 2016, started doing social stuff for them, other miscellaneous jobs, and then I hired my EP in 2018, started doing sports stuff, and now we're just doing a lot of sports animation, just kind of by chance. It's a really interesting situation the way it happened, but sometimes you never know what's going to happen next, and just leave room for possibilities, just being prepared, and yeah.
Phil, that's a
Don't burn
ridiculous
out.
story. I just want to see a picture of your face when you found out that job
It was
didn't
so
exist.
bad. It was so bad. You have no idea. It was 2008, 9 too, and I was like, of course I
times.
expected that.
So you're going to do this, but in order to do something like this, it's not like we all went to school for business leadership or anything like that. Did you have any guidance, mentors, role models that you were seeking advice from to help get to that next step?
I know for me, at least, not right away. There was a lot of ambiguity that I truly did not know how to navigate. The thing about mentorship is, I personally think it's so critical for success, and it's a hard thing to find, right? Your question you ask is how do I find a mentor? How do I find someone that can help me? And the reality is, it's these small incremental steps that you take that slowly starts to define who your mentor is. It's not just, usually, not just hey, will you be a mentor of mine? It's someone that you trust, maybe a former graduate or a former colleague, someone who's kind of give you advice at one time. Then all of a sudden you reach back out to them and you say, hey, I'm trying to navigate this. How would you handle this, right? And then you reach out to them a third time. And the next thing you know, they start to become your confidant and who you can turn to ask these really hard and tough questions. And in the early days, that's how it was for me. I started this studio. My background was design. It was not business, and so trying to figure out how to deal with SOWs, MSAs. I didn't even know what these acronyms meant at the time. But I know there were other studio owners and agency owners in North Carolina, and so there was a few that I reached out to and just started chatting with and asking if they would take up time. One in particular for me was this gentleman named David Baldwin, who runs Baldwin & It's an agency based in Raleigh. And I just remember even early on how willing he was to just share so much information with me. Oh yeah, here's an MSA, a master services agreement, or a statement of work. And just kept giving me all this info, and then slowly but surely it became one of these things where we got coffees with regularity, and we were catching up. And that's really how the mentorship was born. So I think it's a huge critical piece for one of the reasons Dash has been successful is the people in my life that have taken the time and the energy to kind of give back. And I think the way that I would suggest doing that right now is, start with former graduates, folks that maybe you knew as older classmen, a great place to start, talking with people who are in the industry right now, but just continually following up. You don't necessarily have to ask for so much now, but just having those conversations. But I think it's a really critical piece to the success of your company.
I completely agree. And for us, we started our studio in the middle of COVID and not really having worked at any other studios or anything. For my partner and I, it was really hard to know what this industry even was. We knew we liked animating our graphic design that we'd done for a really long time, but we didn't really know what it was. And one of the things we got really, really good at was, like Mac did, just start connecting with as many studio owners as we can find. I mean, I was sitting on Vimeo for days, and we would just look up like Motion Reel 2020 and just like watch all of them, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever, and just you realize how big the industry is, but also how small at the same time. And so what was really pleasant for us was when we reached out to folks, like Mac was one of the people we reached out to first, being in North Carolina, and people from Ordinary Folk. And I mean, there were really just so many people along the way at any studio that we reached out to with not like a, hey, can you please get us a job or any of those sorts of things, like really just truly curious about how did you guys succeed? Like, how did you do this? This is very strange to us. We don't know. And everyone was surprisingly very helpful. So it's been very good.
I mean, pretty much echoing what these guys have been saying. Like, I feel like I've been so fortunate during my career to just have always people in my corner and just supporting. And really, without their help, like, I wouldn't know half of the stuff that I know right now. And one thing that I really want to bring up is, like, we work in this very creative environment. And I think a lot of time creative people are very willing to share their knowledge and very willing to share their skill. And a lot of the times, the best thing that you can do is just kind of like ask. Like, if you have questions, ask. Make sure that, Alan, I think yesterday during the alumni panel, mentioned just sit next to the person that's like the smartest in the room. And I think that's like the best advice. That literally happened to my husband and business partner at the time, where it's like one day he just happened to sit next to someone else and the desks changed, and that's how he learned his new skill. And that person has been a mentor for us pretty much ever since. So another thing that is also important, I think, to know is when you're finding a mentor, it's not always like an overall figure that's going to know everything. So for me, it's been a lot of learning things from different people, different skills. I've had people that taught me more like the technical skills, and people that just give me the opportunity to have a space and to trust me and fail and succeed. And that has been one of the most useful parts of having someone like that by your side. So I would say super important is looking at the people around you, recognizing what they can offer you, and then just try and reach out.
Yeah, I definitely echo the idea of reaching out and asking questions and not being guarded with the things that you don't know. I think the motion design and animation and VFX community is one that's typically very open and welcoming, and people like being industry friends. And the people that are in this room right now, a lot of them you'll know for a long time. That definitely happened with me. I mentioned my first and only real job that I've had, and I got fired, and I still am close with several people who were absolutely pivotal. It took my graphics reel that I was creating in Queens and put it on a CD at Imaginary Forces desk for me. I didn't do that. And you'll find these connections. If you're gonna start a business really young, as I did, I've always felt like I never really had a mentor. And it's like when I hear these stories about mentorships, it's like a hole for me personally. It's something I've always wanted, but that never really happened for me. But I did have confidants and people that I could go to about very specific things. whether it's finances or creative intentions, or you have to have people that you can go to. But I think it's also very hard to find that mentor that's really going to show you the way and be that everything. I don't know that exists for creative people who are maybe a little crazy in their own unique way, need to embrace that in order to make their career right. But if I was to give an answer, I would say it's my father. When you make a business, it gets a little bit beyond just business. You start to really be part of people's lives. And whether you like it or not, you may have an outsized influence on their lives when you're an employer. And I think it really starts to come into moral decisions and principles and clarity on that level. So don't be afraid to reach into what you've been taught by people who raised you as well when you get into business, because it's really comes down to life. So anyways, that's my answer.
I do like the part of being the employer and having that weird connection with your employees. Like, I just want to piggyback on that. The first time I paid health insurance for somebody else, it's a really weird feeling like you're responsible for them, and you feel like, I want you to be okay, here's your health care. Like, it's just a weird feeling as a person, you still feel young, and that's a big thing. But I think like what Christina was saying, I think it's a lot of little heroes along the way. I never had a mentor that was the one-all, be-all kind of figure, but just be friendly, be kind, leave your ego. That's what we're all here for. Like, you're all going to grow up together in this industry when we're gone at some point, and that's who you're going to call on. You're going to say, hey, remember we went to SCAD, and what are you doing now? Oh, you're over there. Like, hey, I'm doing 3D design. Like, can I come over there? And it's all these connections you find, and you kind of piece them along, like, through the years. That's kind of what got me all my freelance gigs, was like, hey, I know Phil, he's a cool guy. He's not an asshole. Bring him over, he's not half bad. So I think in general, like, for me, when I'm hiring people, sometimes leave the ego. If the ego outweighs the quality of the work, like, we'd rather have somebody who's kinder, ready to learn, and isn't as good of an artist, if that makes sense. Creates a better, like, community, and then everyone can have their little heroes in our community, and you're building something out of that.
Yeah, and I always just love the statement of, like, just stand on the shoulders of giants. Sit between those two people that you want to follow in their path, and you usually find that no one's protective of their information. We're, like, I think, one of the most generous communities ever. So let's kind of look back on some of those early moments in your careers doing this. And I don't like to use the word mistakes, because we know that mistakes are part of our journey and what they make of us. But do you remember some things looking back now that, if you could give some advice, like maybe things to be thinking of? I don't know if I want to say, like, what was a mistake that you made, but what is something that maybe looking back you would maybe tell yourself to do a little bit differently, or to tell someone who's thinking about a career in your trajectory in that way?
I think for me, it echoes a lot of some of the conversations that are not only happening on this panel, but previous panels as well, about being kinder to yourself. To quote Brene Brown here, if anyone reads Brene Brown, you all are showing up. You're in the arena, you're showing up, you're taking steps forward. I struggled with, over my years in running this company for the last almost 9 now, about having made mistakes, having misstepped, or looking back and feeling like, God, I wish I, with hindsight, would have handled something differently. And you have these kind of cringe moments, but the reality is that you don't always know the best answer and the best way to move forward, and all you can do is make a decision on what you have at that moment in time, right? And so I think part of it is being kinder to yourself when you're making decisions, and that mistakes do happen. But, mistakes are some of the best learning lessons. I mean, I know that sounds like so cliche to say. I'll give you a story. It was the early days of Dash. At the time, we were maybe like 3 or 4 people in size, and we had this massive project come up. I mean, just big time project, numbers I didn't think we were going to be able to bid on. I just could not believe it. We were so excited. We had, like, kind of an in with the client. Like, they kind of knew us. I had this relationship with this individual from college, so again, get to know your friends. My friend went on to this big company, and we put together this big pitch, and we lost it. And I started replaying like why we lost it. You know, I kept thinking it was maybe something I did or we didn't present ourselves the right way. And it was such a massive number at the time. I just remember being so upset with myself because I was like, we'll never get a project that size again. Like, that was it. That was the opportunity, and I blew it. And 3 years later, we got a project equally that size, and we won it, right? And so what I did learn is that, you know, even just going through the experience and like maybe not pitching it that well, maybe not being as confident about myself, I learned that, and I was more prepared for the next time that came up. So when you have that cringe-worthy moment and you're like, I didn't handle that all that well, just remember that it's just setting yourself up for success later on, and not to beat yourself up, because we're going to Brene Brown it, and we're showing up in the arena, and we're moving forward.
I think for me, there were also a lot of times where I was hard on myself in the sense of feeling like I didn't know enough to do something. But as I've gotten marginally older, I mean, I'm only 22, but still somewhat older, there has yet to be a time where we've had the studio where it has been worse to have tried either building something in public or just trying something at the furthest level we thought that we were scared of, really. Just jumping into things that were a little bit more scary rather than being like, I need to practice more and I need to like get to this level of a personal project before I can do that client project and those sorts of things. Because in all honesty, the only reason we're getting the opportunities that we're getting is because we've already shown that we can do that, and we're reaching out to the people that we felt like were untouchable and that wouldn't be willing to talk to us and those sorts of things. So I'd say that for sure, but also just being willing to bet on yourself. Noah and I, my co-founder, were both at a college that was not like SCAD. They were not as supportive of our career paths, and were a lot more restrictive in what we were doing. And I had multiple conversations with a bunch of mentors because we were terrified of like, oh, we're kind of already running the studio. I don't know, but like we wanted to drop out and try it. But like, you know, that old method for me was like, I have to get the degree. I've got to figure that out before I'm able to do what I want to be doing. Even though little did I know the whole time I was already doing what I wanted to do anyway. So I don't know. It's anything that you're really just worried about doing, you're probably better off just pushing through that fear now, because you're just going to get further and faster to that part where you've already figured that part out for yourself.
This is actually going to get a little repetitive because I was going to say something very similar. I think my biggest advice, which is something that all of us still feel most of the time, but it's like, don't let your imposter syndrome prevent you from taking certain opportunities. I feel like, you know, we're always our biggest critique. Like we always like try and, that's how you get better, right? You analyze your own work, you make sure that you compare yourself to the people that you're really looking up to. And I think sometimes certain opportunities come up that you're like, man, this would be awesome, but I don't think I'm ready, and I'm not meeting this super long list of expectations that's out there. So I'm not even gonna try, I'm gonna embarrass myself if I do it. But the truth is that I feel most people never qualify for that entire list. So at the end of the day, the people that get chosen are the ones that even put themselves in the game in the first place. So, you know, as much as your inner self is telling you, maybe I'm not ready for this, you're never gonna actually know if that's the truth until you actually try it out. I did that a little bit through my career, where it's like, I feel like I have to be completely buttoned up before I even try talking to these people. And I think that might have slowed me down here and there, so that's probably just my advice.
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
We were talking a little bit about what, looking back, maybe any mistakes that you made or advice that you'd maybe give yourself or students now.
Honestly, it's super hard to narrow it down because I make mistakes every single day. You know, we produce at a high volume. We have a very dynamic environment. We do go into the office, which adds to that dynamism in different ways. But there's a lot of personality in motion design studios, and people are going to make mistakes all the time. I think you do have to be very forgiving of yourself and also the people you're working with. I would say any regret that I've had beyond making mistakes that you learn from is losing your cool. Just don't. You know, keep it cool. Like, don't. You can freak out on yourself, and most creatives are in a constant process of freaking out on themselves. Don't let that bleed over to your relationships with your colleagues, your collaborators, and your clients. Keep the crazy inside, you know, because I do look back and say, maybe that was really harsh what I said, or maybe that was foolhardy to, you know, just, you know, lose it. It's good to be passionate and allow your passion to come out when it comes to the creative stuff. But as I mentioned earlier, it's like being head of a studio, you really do have influence on people's lives. And when that happens, you have to keep your cool. And it all becomes kind of very interconnected. So any mistake that I made where I kind of either wasn't able to keep it together, or sweating the small stuff too much, or letting the client see you sweat, it's, you know, generally it's all good. And things are going to work themselves out as long as you are really listening and paying attention to what the people around you need and what, you know, your projects need. Things are going to work out. So just keep your cool. That would be really my advice.
Well, I don't remember you yelling at me, so you're doing good. I'll take it from the profit side instead of the passion side. We had a big lesson early on when Too Fresh started, when it was just me wearing the producer, the creative director, animator, designer hat. I'm sure a lot of you guys have this same issue where when you're creative and you want to talk about money, it becomes a little weird. You're like, this feels very expensive, but like that's kind of like a norm of what the project would cost. So we did a project. It was another really big budget, massive for when we were very small. And we did the project. I'm like, hey, you know what? We need to get that payment up front. We need to get that payment up front. Yeah, sure, it'll come. Okay, cool. We're all working. It's the day of delivery. We never got our payment. No, don't worry. It's in the mail. We delivered the project. All the artists were done. Still didn't get paid. So there was a big problem there. All of the freelancers had to be paid, but I never got the check. So learning from that mistake of going into debt and deciding if you want to continue the studio or not, I would hope that no one here would have to go through that. It was a dark, dark time. And I'm sure some of these guys have had some similar issues, but this is why producers are very valuable, and they deal with money, and we deal with creative. And I would just recommend, if you're going to work with a client, whether you're on your own or you're starting your own studio, just do some research, understand who they are, understand, do they have the money, is everything going to be good? Because at the end of the day, we are passionate about this, but we also have to make a living, pay for other people to make a living, pay for their health care. It becomes a bigger issue when the money doesn't come in. So
I also just want to jump in on that because we're talking about some things that are really important here. Like,
yeah.
I remember when I first got out of school, this understanding that like a client had the best interest for you sometimes, or like things were non-negotiable, or it just is what it is. If you have a gut feeling that something feels wrong, if your gut says this feels weird, say something.
Oh yeah, the gut. Listen to
so,
it. Oh,
so
absolutely,
right.
man. We say that all the time.
I
Like
know.
something's wrong. I feel like queasy. Like, should we back off?
Yeah, you should always feel comfortable pushing back. A project won't end because something feels uncomfortable. If you see something in the contract and you're like, hey, I want to have portfolio rights, but you don't say I can have that, you should ask for that. You know, if you want to get paid 50% up front, 50% at completion, 100% up front, you should always ask. You should always ask, right? The worst someone's going to say is no. Projects don't end because you try to negotiate that stuff. If something feels uncomfortable, talk about it. If you're getting a job offer and you're working with a company, you know, if something feels like this is lower, you've done your research, it feels like it should be higher, you should bring that up. You should have a discussion about it. They don't end because you bring it up and there's friction. It just means you're standing up for yourself, and that's something to keep in mind. It's really important.
Sorry, just wanted to add
Please
to that
do.
real quick, because that is like something that, you know, speaking of, it's always uncomfortable to talk about money, right? I think that is kind of like a taboo almost that we all run into as artists, because we already do what we do because we really like to do it, right? And some people take like tend to take advantage of that sometimes, and you really don't want to put yourself in that position. And I think one of the things that I realized with time, it's like there's nothing wrong, or there should be nothing uncomfortable speaking about money, because if this is our job, it's a job like everything else. So as long, even if it feels a little icky to be like, well, here's the invoice. It's like, no, that's literally why I did this. So don't feel bad about it. That's really something that takes a long time to, I think, accept. But I always realize that the more you respect yourself and the more you show yourself that you're worth that, the more people out there will also understand that and treat you with respect when it comes to also financial stuff.
And I love talking a little bit about, keeping your cool, and you're always probably, the day-to-day of your lives are in many different areas. But in your studio specifically, what do you do to facilitate just good studio team culture? And I'm just curious to see what you all sort of do with your teams.
I know something that I was not expecting to have to navigate that has been at the forefront of my day-to-day is HR. I started this company because I love animation, I love design. I never thought I would be a leader in the HR space, but when you run a company, that's what you're doing. Because the reality is that all of you are here today because you're thinking about your careers, you're thinking about where you want to go, and it's irresponsible of me as an owner to not be thinking about that as well. And I think everyone up here would agree that we know we are able to keep good quality talent because we're looking out at the company, but also what you bring to it, what the future looks like for you, and how you're going to grow. So one of the things that takes up the vast majority of my time is one-on-ones with all my staff to see, what's been going well, what are some of your concerns, and where can I help, right? I'm always trying to figure out ways to help and see what the future looks like. And I think it's also a reminder, just as you're thinking about questions to ask your future employer, coming out of school, a question I wish I asked was, what are you doing to ensure I'm successful in this position? That type of question, when you ask your employer that, is going to show you two things. One, it's going to give green flags if they have a system set up and they're giving you direction, you have a mentor or someone you're pairing with. And if they don't have anything prepared, it's a bit of a red flag because it's like, are you just using me as a butt in a seat to get stuff done? Or are you really thinking about me and what I bring to the table?
That's exactly right. And since we have a fairly small team, we're like 7 people, and we keep it close-knit for a reason, because that way everybody really feels like friends, and it can feel like that sort of like garage studio environment sometimes. We really make sure that everybody feels like they have a voice and a seat at the table, regardless of what the decisions are, but especially the big ones. We are very transparent with everyone on the team about financials. Everybody knows what everybody else is making and those sorts of things, and that clears up a lot of the just ickiness in general. We're talking about like being transparent about money and being willing to be confident in those sorts of things outwardly, but that's very important inside of a studio as well, because the number one way that we've seen just ill will happen within even fantastic studios that have great work is just not being willing to be transparent in some of those things, and it can be tough. And as an owner, that can lose a little bit of your competitive advantage, I guess is the icky way to say it. But truly, that's the way to foster a great team, is just making sure that everybody feels heard. And really, when we're making decisions, it's like a council vote, something out of, I don't know, everybody sitting at a round table or something. But that's been most important and has given us a lot of interesting perspective as founders, because our team is international. We get lots of interesting insights and just ways of thinking about things at all levels of the company that we might not necessarily have within our narrow vision of trying to just push the company forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. Totally agree with all of that. I think for me, Ann Skopas, she's our EP at Scholar New York, and she said something once that really stuck with me, which was, ours is not an industry or product, it's an industry of talent. And that is something that we always have to keep at the forefront of our mind whenever we're trying to manage a team. It's the people themselves. Because at the end of the day, you want to create an environment where everyone can express their creativity as best as possible, because that becomes the most productive thing for you in your studio as well. So to cultivate that environment, I think the biggest thing, kind of like what you guys were saying, is communication and keeping an open channel and making sure that everyone feels like they contribute to the conversation. And to me, you know, that is not just something just to say, but it's very true, because it's like, even if someone is just coming out of college, right, they might have a very fresh perspective, or being a different generation, you know, just like a different approach to something that could be extremely useful. Or maybe someone has been in the industry for a long time and they have so much knowledge to share as a senior. So there's always something valid to take from everyone on your team. And then obviously, you know, as like a director or a studio owner, you always have to find a way to channel all of that energy into something that's like a product. But at the end of the day, you know, it's a product that comes from people. So definitely finding the need to value that.
Yeah, I agree with everything that was said there. I think what I'd like to add is you can keep it kind of simple in a studio environment where you just look to constantly remind each other why you're aligned. The studio that you choose to work with and the studio that chooses to work with you should be aligned in the present and in the future. And if you're able to check in on that and know that that's true, then it comes down to, okay, do I like the kind of work they're doing? Does that align with me? And are they paying you something that you feel like is an industry standard? It's good to kind of take some of the personal life things out of it when you get into a larger studio. And because people are really different, and they have different life goals, and they have different personalities, they have different backgrounds, and that's what makes the situation vibrant. As a studio head, it's my job to create clarity in your professional life as best we can as a whole. So we have mentorship programs for different positions. They have different mentorships or mentors throughout the studio, and we do pretty significant check-ins, again, about being aligned and making sure it's a win-win. And it's okay if things become unaligned and it's time for you to go. You know, and it's in some ways, and you should find situations that it's all temporal. Like you'll get out of alignment because you're going to grow as a person, or the studio's going to change. And don't be afraid of that. Look at that as an opportunity to evolve. Big Star has been super fortunate in that we have very low turnover. We have people who have been there for 10 years plus on staff. We're very staff-centric, and we do try to keep it simple and try to stay aligned. And I think if you can do that, a lot of things can go really well.
I think keep it simple is a good way to say it. I think for us, like one thing is, I mean, the generation that we were working, I feel like would work till 2 a.m. every single night. And for us, we try to get everyone out on time. I think that's a really important thing that has kind of changed. I don't know how Josh and you guys feel about that, but it used to be ridiculous. So that's a big one. But I think for us, I really check in with people a little bit. I mean, everyone's checking in different styles here. But I also kind of am very friendly with everybody. We're all kind of friends at Too Fresh. And I can tell when somebody's like stuck, and I'm like, hey, do you want to shift? Like, is your brain tired of making logos for a week? Like, I totally get that. Like, let's try something else and come back to it. We'll shift somebody else there. So being aware of everyone's feelings and keeping a light environment, I think that just produces better work. Like, happiness creates art. Like, if you're upset, if somebody says something wrong or you got bad feedback, like, pay attention to that. Like, if someone took bad feedback the wrong way, check in with them. Like, they're gonna have trouble making a fix because of that. They're gonna be holding on to it. You know how we are as artists. Like, oh no, I messed up, I'm sorry. One of the biggest things I learned when I actually was working at Big Star was there was an artist there that told me, hey man, you need to stop saying you're sorry so much. Because I would always say, I'm sorry, I did it wrong. But he said, you don't need to say you're sorry. Everyone has their own opinion. Like, maybe Josh likes it, but maybe Christina doesn't like it. Like, you like it, so just come up with a reason why you did it. If they don't like it and they're your boss, change it to what they want. Yeah, it was. How'd you know? So he told me not to say you're sorry. So I would hold that from your vocabulary as much as possible. And just, if you're confident about your work, people read confidence. Like, at least at our studio, like sometimes I don't like what somebody has put out, but the way that they pitch it to me, the way that I look at it against the brief, I'm like, hey, that actually works. I may not personally think it's the coolest, and I'm not going to nitpick that thing to death, but I'll put it forward. Hey, let's give it a go. Let's see if it works. Like, in my opinion, even though I am the studio head at our studio, isn't the end-all, be-all. Like, we're all have opinions, and I'm not the greatest at no one's the greatest at what they do. There's always flaws, so I don't know where I'm going to end that, but that's, yeah.
Just as we think about studio dynamics, and you're looking to get into your first, serious professional gigs, think about the scale of the studio you'd like to be at, because that influences the culture and all the things that we're talking about on the stage. Financial transparency, just practices in the office. Are you going into an office? Are you working remotely? There's a lot of advantages and pros and cons when it comes to style and scale of studio, and it's something to really understand for any studio that you're speaking with. And maybe you know what's right for you.
So in a few moments, we're going to open it up to some great questions, so start thinking about those. But I'm going to pose one last question to all of you is, who is your co-pilot? Whether they are here today or someone you just want to give a shout out, that one person or a couple of people that you go to when times are tough and you just need another ear.
Oh my gosh, I feel so lucky that I have such an amazing co-founder who's also my best friend who's not here today, so I can really talk some smack. No, I'm just kidding. No, Corey Livengood is the other half of Dash, and I met Corey when I was a junior animator at the first agency. And here's a guy who's a little bit older than me. He was super kind, very welcoming. I came into this space where I didn't really know anyone. Corey would take time and show me how to make my animation files not so messy, be more organized. He introduced me to folks, and we really found this great rapport where I'm really gregarious. I'll talk to anyone. Corey's a little bit softer, but well-spoken, very articulate on his design. Big idea guy. Corey's very much of a technician. And so, we worked together for 5 years, and when we started the company together, hats off to anyone who's doing it on their own, because, to have someone, a confidant, that you can go to discuss things, to break things down through the really hard times and their hard times, through the really good times. I just know that Dash wouldn't be what we are today without my co-founder, Corey, and I'm just so thankful that I found someone like that you can navigate life with in such a creative way. It's just been really lucky to have.
I agree. My co-founder, Noah Wild, who's filming me right now instead, but maybe he just wants this for his wallpaper or something, I don't know. Like I said, I wanted to be an engineer when I was younger, and so I get to college and sure, I've done some design, but then there's this guy who I get here, and he's immediately just asking questions. He wants to know all about design, and he's just so invested and interested in the craft and trying new things. Plus, I've always been more introverted, kind of like the opposite of you guys. I've always been more introverted, and Noah is inserting himself anywhere. He is comfortable talking to anyone at any time about anything and just always has the right things to say. And like Mac was saying, it's great to have a confidant and somebody that you can go through the hard times with, but also just share the excitement with, Somebody else that's been there throughout everything and is really able to feel the same weight of the successes is just, it's another level of connection. But in the same way, when you feel like doing something a little risky and you're like, I don't know, should we do this project, should we not, whatever, and it might be a hard decision to make on your own. When you have somebody else that's yeah, let's do it. It's okay, now we're both in this, we can ride or die. It's good.
Yeah, mine, I don't have directly a co-founder or anything, but mine is a little bit more of a personal answer. For me, it's my husband, Josh, which I'm not just being biased. He's FXCD and artist, actually worked at Big Star. And because he's also in the industry, but has pretty much the opposite brain than I do, he is so like technically focused and just like so knowledgeable in that sense. And I'm a little bit more on like the creative people side. Like it tends to just be this very organic kind of like collaboration of bouncing back and forth. Like we share the same office, so it's like sometimes I'm like, hey, how do I do this? I can't remember how to do this. And he'll hop over, or he's like, hey, can you check my email so that I'm not like, I come off like nice, you know, which he is. But there's just something really nice to be able to go through different stages of your career with someone who's aware of all those steps, all those challenges, so that then you can ask for advice, bounce ideas, or sometimes just like pick up and move somewhere else because you just want to try something new. So I'm extremely lucky and grateful to have someone who's a partner when it comes to life, but also a partner in my career. So yeah.
Yeah, these days, as Big Star has changed and grown through the years, there's been just a lot of different seasons to the company. And, as I look forward to what I'm calling Big Star 3.0, definitely, Virgil Conklin over here is beyond what you would call a right-hand man. I mean, he's really helping define the future of the company. And I think as an owner, that's what you need. You need someone who's not just dealing with the right now, but that is invested in the future of the company and what it means to be there, what it means to influence the industry, the culture itself, and have a high level of commitment. When you own and run a studio, your commitment level is extraordinarily high, as it's just part of the job. It comes with the territory. But it's very hard to find people who can meet that level of commitment. So when you find people that you can relate to on a commitment level, it's really, really special. And you must take care of those relationships. They're extraordinarily important. And I just wanted to, as an aside, when I started Big Star, it was actually, there were 3 people that started the company. After 1 year, one of them left, and to come back to mistakes, we ousted him from the company in a way that wasn't fair. And that we're all still friends, but that was a mistake, and it was brash. It wasn't a mistake that he should leave the company. It was just the method in which it was done. We didn't know what we were doing, making it up as we go along. I would redo that. Then 5 years down the line, Alex Kravitz, who was the other co-founder of the company, we had 50-50 control of it. It just became the hardest part of our day was dealing with each other. Not our clients, not the work. So we knew we needed to split the company. And, after 6 months of negotiation, I was left owning 100% of the company and hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt because of it. And that's, when you talk about betting on yourself, you kind of have to take that high risk, high reward attitude if you want to start your own studio. And you have to really believe in yourself, because at the end of the day, it is kind of on you. But if you can find great people that can reach a high level of commitment to the present and future of what you're trying to do as a company, it's really special. Take great care of those relationships.
So besides my dog, who's seen all the good and bad, I would like to shout out Scott Rothstein. He's out there somewhere. He's our EP. We met on Motionographer, and he took a chance and left Blind, who was EP there for a while, and we were next to nothing, and somehow he believed and saw a diamond in the rough. I would do $800 projects at home to hide them from him because I was embarrassed. We were trying to make money. And now we're doing great, and I definitely attribute a lot of that to him. The best part of having a partner like that is we're not afraid to say anything to each other. If he hurts my feelings, it's because he was right. And I think that's the best part of our relationship is like being able to talk to somebody and not have any walls at all, and knowing like if you tell them you're the right answer, they're going to say, shoot, like you're right. Yeah, I should have done something differently. Like, and that's what's made a lot of success at Too Fresh with us. So shout out to him wherever you are.
Love him. let's take one or two questions from the audience. I see that hand went up right over here. I don't know how you're all going to do all this. I can't see. Let's see.
Mwahaha.
Ah, hello.
She can't get rid of me. Hi. First off, thank y'all so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. I know everyone else does. My question actually bounces back to something we talked about, or excuse me, y'all talked about a little bit earlier, back to what would you do if you had done it differently? As someone who, on a freelance level as well as just a designer level, has had 1 to 5 to 7 different clients that have left me with, oh, that is a new clause I'll put in my contract, or, oh, okay, that's a sunk cost. What is something to every student that might freelance, or every student that's going to take on a project with a client that you're like, have you ever thought about adding this or asking this question that you're like right now, if you're not thinking about it, please do.
I've got one that's really topical that I'm going to jump in on just because it's a learning lesson that I've gone through myself. We've gotten to a point in size and scale of some of our projects that they've gone on for long periods of time, and longer than I ever would have anticipated they would go on. And so one clause that we've started putting in there is a cliff and a termination date, where we basically say that, like, by this point in time, you have to use this money, and if not, then you forfeit it. Now, goes back to one of the comments I had earlier. They're not always going to agree to that, but we always try to push it, because at a certain point, it starts to really drain our resources as a smaller company if it starts going beyond. So that's one we've had. Yeah, and that's probably the biggest one, I would say.
I was going to say, as a younger artist, I think being able to show your work, and sometimes in these contracts, it's like you can't show it once you're done. I feel like that does hinder the quickness where you can get off the ground. So just make sure you can show the work at an early stage in your career. Otherwise, it's your website kind of looks like you're still in college, and someone's like, oh, congratulations, you just graduated. Oh, I've been out for 3 years. Oh, shit.
Yeah, we lean heavily on deliverables lists with very specific criteria. So runtime, if you're into animation, and instances of a deliverable, because you can put like, hey, we're going to create digital banners. And then 50 digital banners later, you're like, when is this done? And they're saying you're still in scope. So just trying to have really finite, very clear deliverables on your scope of work, which you need to get signed off on, both on your side and on their side. And your invoicing just needs to be clear. They want your invoices. Their bookkeepers want your invoices. Never be ashamed to send an invoice. Just do it in a timely manner. And all of that stuff, I've embraced this recently, should also look good. Like, your invoices should look nice. Your scope of work should look nice, because you're designers. You'll get bigger budgets.
Yeah, I agree with everything that everyone said so far, but also something that really helped us out early on, just like people are willing to talk to you, some people are willing to send you like samples of contracts that they send over. They just take the info out and those sorts of things. So that might just be something to read through and find things you might not have been thinking about anyway.
I think, kind of like going on what Josh was saying, aside from deliverables, like, always make sure that you know the timeline of a project. Like, sometimes, especially when you get to being in a freelancer stage, where you're going to have studios that maybe will try and get like very long first holds, right? And a lot of the time they're doing that because they don't know all the details of their project. So it's like, I'm going to keep you ready in case I need your help in that time, right? But sometimes certain situations happen where it's like, I don't know if I'm going to work this time. I don't know what's going to happen. So just try to be honest with your client and figuring out what the timeline of the project might be. And also for yourself, make sure that if you do a career as a freelancer, that you schedule in some time off for yourself. Because it's very tempting, I think, when everything that you bring home depends on how much time you work, to say, no, I'm not going to work, knowing that every single day that you're not doing that, you're not bringing home income. But it's really, really essential to protect your own time and to schedule and be organized with that as well, with the expectations of the client, but also for yourself.
All right. I wish we could continue to this panel. I'm not ready to leave and have much more questions to ask, and I'm sure you do, but I think we're going to wrap here because we have our awards ceremony in a few moments that we're going to kick off or conclude the evening. But please, let's just give a nice round of applause for this. This was fantastic. Thank you so much. This is fantastic. All right. All right, everyone. All right.
Sorry.
Here they come.
Thank you so much to our panelists. You guys did great. So yeah, we're gonna come back at 5:45 for our awards ceremony, which is where we're gonna wrap up the evening. Thank you guys so much.